Hello everyone, if you found your way to my channel you'll already know that I am Carol of Oak House Journals, and I've lifted out my Dogma Embroidery Challenge journal, or the two little signatures that will eventually go on to make up my journal in due course. Now, the Dogma Embroidery Challenge is a challenge being hosted by Lisbeth Degn, and there is a link below in the description box to her channel so that you can find out more information about the challenge. So here I've lifted out the page that I'll be working on. It's that left hand page. I will be doing week 8 of the challenge, and the first dogma rule is to trace or stitch the outline of a circle onto fabric of your favorite color. Now, this is my all-time favorite fabric, and and also, quite sadly, my favorite color, which is a cream or off-white. This is vintage French linen, and I'm just trying to decide which frayed edge I want on my page. But you'll notice there isn't much of a differential between the white paper that is forming my signature and that French linen fabric. So I've lifted out another piece of fabric here, and this is just a lightweight cotton fabric, and I will be using that to stitch on. So here I'm just working out what size I need, and I will trim both these pieces to size. So that's what I'm doing here, just making a snip and then ripping them and fraying away the edges. So I've done one side, doing the bottom, and then going in with my second piece of fabric, which I'm making slightly smaller but still trying to keep the frayed edges, layering them on top of each other, and there they are on top of my page. The second dogma rule was to use a variety of threads but in the same colour tone as your fabric. So here you can see I'm just going through what threads I have available to me at the moment, picking out what might be best for my design. As I mentioned, the first dogma rule said to trace or stitch the outline of a circle onto your fabric. So here I'm just using Frick's and marker pen and a little pot, and I'm drawing a circle onto my top fabric, just adjusting the design. And because I got 2 layers of fabric, I've lifted out some pins and I've just pinned them together so they don't move whilst I'm stitching. Here I'm just looking for a suitable thread to do the outline of my circle, and having found one, I'm just going in doing split back stitch all the way around the outside of my circle. I do decide that I want to actually whip the back stitch at a later stage, because after I did the design in the center of my circle, I found that the backstitch wasn't really standing out enough, so I went over the top with a single strand of DMC thread and just whipped it. Now that the circle's finished, I'm just holding it up to the camera so you can have a closer look. And now for the exciting bit. The third dogma rule was the stitch that we are to use. Now, the stitch is to be blanket stitch, and it can only be stitched in a horizontal line, and we're to experiment with the blanket stitch. And as you probably already know, I can't do anything in straight lines, certainly not straight horizontal lines. So I've drawn myself a central line across my circle. Here I'm just lifting out some thick merino wool thread. Now, this thread really isn't suitable for stitching. If I tried to pull it through the fabric, it would break. So what I decided to do was to take several layers, and that's what I'm doing here, twist them together, lay them across that central line on my piece of fabric, and then use my blanket stitch over the top to couch the merino wool down. So here I am just doubling up my thread and twisting it, and then doubling it up again and twisting it. Checking it out on my piece to see if it's thick enough, I decide it isn't, so double it up again. I'm happy with that piece, and here I'm going in with a little bit of art glitter glue just to hold it in place whilst I'm stitching over the top. And whilst it's drying, I've just got a couple of little quilter's clips in place, as I say, whilst it's drying. Here it is about 10 minutes later, nicely dry, and I'm just cutting the edges so that they sit inside my circle. There we go, all ready to sew now. To do the couching over that merino wool, I lift out quite a thick perle cotton, and it's got quite a nice pearlescent sheen to it. It is very thick, so I had to use a darning needle to actually do the couching over the top of that merino wool. So here I am just doing a basic blanket stitch. And trying to keep my stitches as close as I could to the merino wool, and also trying to keep my stitches as regular as I could. Really loved the effect of this actually. It turned out much better than I thought it was going to, and there we go, that's how it looks when it's done. So again, going in with my Friction marker pen and drawing another couple of horizontal lines on either side of that couched merino wool. And going in again with some more of that thick perle cotton. And I stitch a basic line of blanket stitch above and also below the merino wool. So just going over the top at the moment, counting every other stitch as I go. And what I mean by every other stitch, every other blanket stitch that I did over the merino wool, and there you can see both lines there. So here I've gone in with, I think it was 6 strands of a darker cream DMC thread, so four strands of stranded cotton, might have been 6, can't remember now I'm afraid. And what I'm doing is I'm stitching between the perle cotton to add some interest, and going under the longer stitches of the perle cotton. And I do this again for both rows, one above and one below. So just going to show you in 1 second what it looks like. There we go, you can see how it looks. As I say, I do that above and below the merino wool. So just going to finish off that row. And then move on to the one below. You'll see from the pictures at the end that I go in with even more detail on those rows. Because I don't have a huge selection of threads available to me at the moment, what I decided to do was try and mix and match some of my threads. So here I've gone in with quite a thick hemp thread, and I've married it up with a couple of strands of, again, a slightly darker tone DMC thread. And to experiment with my stitches, or to vary my stitches, I'm doing the legs of my blanket stitch, one long and one short, as I work across this line. And similar to the previous lines I've done, I copy the same design, one above and one below that central line of couch merino wool. And here we go, that's what that line looks like when it's finished. So this is my design fully completed. As you can see, I've gone in and done a lot more stitching. I tried to do thinner more delicate lines with closer stitches at the top and the bottom, using fewer strands of the DMC threads, just purely DMC threads. Here I'm showing you all the different cottons I've used, so I have got a bit of a variety here, but not a lot. So I've got some merino wool, DMC thread, some perlé and that hemp. And bringing in my little journal now, that's my first signature, just being popped off to one side. And this is where this week's piece is going to go. Right there. So just going to go in with a little bit of art glitter glue behind my fabric to hold it in place. So there we go, everybody. That's my piece for this week's challenge, week 8, to trace or stitch a circle or outline of circle onto fabric of your favourite colour, then experiment with blanket stitch using only horizontal lines and a variety of threads but in the same colour tone as the fabric. Thank you as always for watching. Really appreciate your company. I hope you enjoy seeing the pictures that I'm showing here that give you a little bit more detail of how I stitched my piece and the very, very slight colour tone changes throughout this piece. Thank you for watching. Take care, everybody. Have a great week, and I look forward to you joining me for week 9 of the Stitched Circle Show Challenge 2025. Until then, take care. Bye bye now.